Admiral Zex Thera floated in his crystal shell, watching the stars drift past the viewport of his flagship. 10,000 years had passed since the last real war in the galaxy, 10,000 years of peace under Valdorian rule. The word peace might be wrong, though. It was more like silence, the kind of silence that comes after everyone stops arguing because they know who wins. The Valdorian hegemony controlled everything that mattered in the galaxy. Every trade route, every habitable world, every species that had learned to build ships and reach for the stars. Those species had two choices: serve the hegemony or disappear completely. Most chose to serve. Zex Thera had been alive for 3 centuries, which was young for a Valdorian. He remembered when there were still rebellions. Small ones. Usually, some angry species would refuse to pay their tribute or try to hide their best worlds from Valdorian scouts. Those rebellions never lasted long. The Valdorians had weapons that could turn off minds like switching off lights. They called it the Silence Protocol. The crystal beings were perfect rulers because they thought as one. When one Valdorian made a decision, all the others in the local network felt it instantly. They shared thoughts, shared knowledge, shared purpose. No confusion. No arguments. No waste. Just pure, efficient control. Zex Thera's current mission was routine cleanup work in the outer spiral arms. These regions always had a few primitive species trying to build their first starships or establish their first colonies. The Valdorians would arrive, demonstrate their power, and add another species to the tribute list. Simple work. But someone had to do it. His tactical display showed the next target system. A yellow star with several planets, including one blue-green world that orbital scans said was full of life. The planet's dominant species called themselves humans, according to the intelligence reports. They had recently developed basic fusion drives and had started spreading to nearby planets and moons. Nothing special about them, really. The intelligence officer's voice whispered directly into Zex Thera's mind through their shared crystal network. Admiral, the humans appear to have established colonies on 7 worlds and moons in their system. Their technology level suggests they achieved faster than light travel, approximately 50 standard years ago. Zex Thera acknowledged the report with a mental pulse. 50 years of interstellar flight meant the humans were still very new to space. Most species took at least 2 centuries to develop real military threats. These humans would probably surrender after the first demonstration of Valdorian power. Any unusual characteristics? Zex Thera asked through the network. Nothing significant. Standard carbon-based biology. Average lifespan of roughly 100 local years. They appear to organize themselves into competing nation-states, rather than a unified planetary government. Military technology is primitive: kinetic projectiles, basic energy weapons, conventional explosives. The Admiral felt a flicker of amusement. Competing nation-states usually made conquest easier. Valdorians could play different human groups against each other, or simply target the strongest government until the others surrendered. Fleet status? He queried. Battle Group 7 stands ready. Admiral. 12 crystal destroyers, 4 dreadnoughts, and the flagship. Full psychic amplifier arrays are charged and standing by. Zex Thera reviewed the standard conquest protocol in his memory banks. First contact would begin with the Silence Protocol, a massive telepathic broadcast that would render every human military officer unconscious within minutes. Once their command structure collapsed, the Valdorians would announce the new reality. Earth and its colonies now belong to the hegemony. Tribute demands would follow. Any resistance would be met with immediate destruction. It was a process the Valdorians had perfected over thousands of years and hundreds of species. Some races tried to fight back after the initial shock, but none had ever lasted more than a few days against Valdorian technology. Crystal ships could appear and disappear instantly through hyperspace. Their weapons could destroy planets. Their psychic networks made coordination perfect and spying impossible. The humans had no chance. Zex Thera's fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the human system, their crystal hulls catching and bending starlight into rainbow patterns. The formation was designed to inspire awe and terror. Geometric perfection that showed the humans exactly how outclassed they were. Human detection systems found the fleet immediately. Zexthara could sense their radio communications buzzing with excitement and alarm. The sounds were primitive, electromagnetic broadcasts, instead of proper psychic links, but the emotion behind them was clear enough. Fear, confusion, and something else. Something that felt almost like excitement? That was odd. Most species responded to first contact with either terror or resignation. Excitement suggested these humans might not understand the situation yet. "Admiral," came a thought from his communications officer. "The humans are attempting to establish contact. They're broadcasting mathematical sequences, cultural information, and what appears to be artistic expressions." Zexthara felt genuine surprise ripple through the fleet's shared consciousness. Mathematics and culture were normal first contact protocols. But art? Most species were too frightened to think about beauty when faced with overwhelming force. "Show me their transmissions." The data flowed directly into his awareness. Numbers, yes, but also music that somehow translated into emotion even through electromagnetic waves. Images of their world, their cities, their people, and underlying it all, a sense of curiosity that seemed almost childlike. These humans were treating first contact like a celebration instead of a catastrophe. "Begin silence protocol," Zexthara ordered. "Standard psychic suppression across all human population centers. Target their military command structures first." The fleet's psychic amplifiers hummed to life, focusing the combined mental force of thousands of Valdorian minds into a single, overwhelming broadcast. The silence had never failed. It was designed to shut down the neural activity of any thinking being, leaving them helpless and compliant. Zexthara waited for confirmation that human resistance had collapsed. Instead, his tactical officer's thoughts carried confusion and growing alarm. "Admiral, the silence protocol appears to be ineffective. Human military units are still responding normally to commands. Their communication networks show no disruption." That was impossible. Zexthara checked the amplifier readings himself. Full power. Perfect coordination. The psychic broadcast should have rendered every human unconscious within moments. "Amplify the signal," he commanded. "Double power output." The crystal network strained under the increased psychic load. Several smaller ships reported minor system fluctuations as their crews poured more mental energy into the broadcast. Still nothing. The humans continued their radio chatter, continued their patrol patterns, continued behaving as if the most powerful mind control weapon in galactic history was simply not affecting them at all. For the first time in 3 centuries of life, Admiral Zexthara felt something he had never experienced before: uncertainty. The human response came 3 hours later, after Zexthara had tried the silence protocol 5 more times at maximum power. Each attempt should have been enough to knock out the entire population of a star system. Each attempt did absolutely nothing to the humans. "Greetings, unknown vessels," came the transmission from Earth in simple, clear language. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Space Command. We've been monitoring your arrival and would like to establish formal diplomatic contact." Zexthara studied the transmission data with growing confusion. The humans' mental patterns were visible through their electromagnetic broadcasts, and what he saw made no sense at all. Most species thought in ordered, logical sequences. Their minds followed predictable paths from problem to solution, from question to answer. Human thoughts looked like chaos. Their minds seemed to jump randomly from idea to idea, mixing emotions with logic, combining memories with imagination in ways that created constant mental noise. It was like trying to listen to a conversation in the middle of a thunderstorm. How could any species function with such disordered thinking? "Admiral Chen," Zexthara broadcast back. "I am Admiral Zexthara of the Valdorian hegemony. Your system has been selected for incorporation into our empire. Prepare to receive our terms for peaceful surrender." The pause that followed lasted exactly 17 seconds. Then Admiral Chen's response came back, and her mental signature carried something Zexthara had never encountered before. It felt like amusement mixed with polite rejection. "Thank you for the offer, Admiral, but we'll have to decline. Earth and her colonies prefer to remain independent. However, we'd be happy to discuss trade agreements or cultural exchanges if you're interested." The words hit Zexthara like a physical blow. In 10,000 years of galactic conquest, no species had ever politely declined to join the hegemony. They begged. They threatened. They tried to negotiate better terms for their surrender, but they never just said no as if they were turning down an invitation to dinner. "You do not understand," Zexthara replied, his mental confusion bleeding through into the transmission. "This is not a request. The Valdorian hegemony claims this system by right of superior force. Resistance will result in complete destruction." Another pause. This time, Admiral Chen's response carried a different emotion. Something that felt like genuine curiosity. "We understand you believe you're superior, Admiral. But we've been scanning your ships for the past few hours, and frankly, we're not impressed. Your technology is interesting, but not overwhelming. We think there might be some room for negotiation here." Zexthara's crystal shell flickered with shocked energy patterns. Not impressed? The humans had primitive fusion drives and kinetic weapons. His fleet carried planet-killing weapons and could appear anywhere in the system instantly. How could they not be impressed? "Demonstrate our capabilities," he commanded his weapons officer. A lance of pure crystal energy shot from the flagship toward Luna Station, the largest human installation in their system. The beam carried enough power to vaporize a small moon. Zexthara expected to see the station disappear in a flash of superheated gas. Instead, the energy beam scattered harmlessly against some kind of defensive field that shouldn't exist. Impossible energy readings flooded the Valdorian sensors as the human shield absorbed and redirected the attack. "Interesting weapon," came Admiral Chen's voice, still calm and curious. "We noticed similar energy patterns in your ship hulls. Is that some kind of crystalline technology? We'd love to learn more about how it works." The tactical officer's panicked thoughts crashed through the fleet network. "Admiral, their defensive shields are reading at impossible power levels. The energy output required to stop our weapons simply cannot be generated by their primitive technology." Zexthara was beginning to understand that perhaps the humans weren't as primitive as the intelligence reports suggested. "Display their ship configurations." The data that flowed into his mind made even less sense than their mental patterns. Human ships looked like they had been built by insane engineers. Their hulls were covered in strange protrusions that served no obvious purpose. Their weapons were mounted in locations that violated every principle of efficient design. Most disturbing of all, their ships seemed to be constantly changing configuration, adding new components, and removing old ones as if they couldn't decide what they wanted to build. "How many ships do they have in this system?" Zexthara asked. "Unknown, Admiral. Our sensors are detecting approximately 200 vessels, but the readings keep changing. Some ships appear to be hiding behind planetary bodies or within gas giant atmospheres. Others seem to be moving through the corona of their star." That last part was clearly wrong. No known material could survive that close to a star's surface. The sensor officer had to be misreading the data. "Admiral," came Admiral Chen's voice again. "We've been discussing your arrival among our various governments, and we've come to a decision. While we appreciate your interest in our system, we really do prefer our independence. However, we're willing to share some of our recent technological developments if you'd like to establish peaceful relations." "Technological developments?" Zexthara found himself asking before he could stop the question. "Oh yes, we've made some interesting breakthroughs in the past 50 years. Energy manipulation, defensive systems, propulsion theory. Nothing too fancy. But we think you might find some of it useful. For instance, we notice your ships use crystalline matrices for power generation. We've been experimenting with similar approaches, though our methods might seem a bit unconventional to you." Zexthara felt the first flutter of something he hadn't experienced in centuries. Genuine uncertainty. The humans were talking as if they were equals, offering to share technology with a species that had conquered the entire galaxy. Either they were completely insane, or they knew something he didn't. "Admiral Chen, you will surrender immediately, or face the consequences. This is your final warning." The response came back faster this time, and Admiral Chen's mental signature carried a new emotion. It felt like disappointment. "Admiral Zexthara, We really hoped we could work this out peacefully. Our xenobiologists were excited about the chance to study your crystalline biology. And our engineers are fascinated by your ships. But if you insist on threats, we'll have to defend ourselves. You cannot defend against the Valdorian hegemony, Zexthera stated with absolute certainty. We'll see about that, Admiral Chen replied. Chen out. The transmission ended, leaving Zexthera staring at his tactical displays in confusion. Around him, the thoughts of his crew carried the same bewilderment. These humans were unlike any species they had ever encountered. They weren't behaving according to any rational pattern. That should have made them easy to defeat. But somehow, Zexthera was beginning to suspect that the humans' apparent insanity might be more dangerous than any logical military strategy he had ever faced. His tactical officer's urgent thoughts cut through his contemplation. Admiral, human ships are moving into attack positions throughout the system. Energy readings are spiking across all their vessels. Zexthera looked at his displays and felt the cold touch of something no Valdorian had experienced in 10,000 years. For the first time since the hegemony began, they were about to face an enemy that refused to surrender. The first human attack came from inside the sun. Zexthera watched his sensors in disbelief as a human ship emerged from the star's corona, its hull glowing white-hot, but somehow still intact. The vessel looked nothing like the ships his scouts had reported. This one was larger, stranger, covered in what looked like crystalline growths that pulsed with familiar energy patterns. How are they surviving solar temperatures? His science officer's thoughts screamed across the network. Before anyone could answer, the human ship opened fire. But instead of primitive kinetic weapons or simple energy beams, it launched something that made Zexthera's crystalline form shiver with recognition. The projectiles carried the same energy signature as Valdorian weapons, but twisted into patterns that hurt to look at. The missiles struck his flagship's shields and did something impossible. Instead of being absorbed or deflected, they seemed to convince the shields they didn't exist. The weapons passed through the defensive fields like they were made of nothing and slammed into the crystal hull with devastating effect. Damage reports, Zexthera commanded. Hull breaches on decks 7 through 12, came the panicked response. The weapons. Admiral, they're using our own technology, but modified in ways that shouldn't work. The mathematics behind their modifications violate basic physics. More human ships appeared from hiding spots throughout the system. They emerged from behind asteroids, from within gas giant atmospheres, and from positions that should have been impossible to reach. Each ship looked different from the others, as if the humans couldn't decide on a single design and had simply built whatever seemed interesting at the time. Their attack patterns made even less sense than their ship designs. Valdorian military doctrine had been perfected over 10,000 years of conquest. Fleets moved in precise formations, following mathematical principles that maximized firepower while minimizing vulnerability. Battles were elegant, efficient, and predictable. The humans fought like they were insane. Ships broke formation to pursue individual targets, even when it left them exposed to concentrated fire. They used ramming attacks, suicide runs, and weapons that appeared to be improvised from mining equipment. One human vessel actually fired a cargo pod full of nuclear explosives at a Valdorian destroyer, destroying both ships in a blast that lit up the entire system. Admiral, his tactical officer reported, we're detecting massive energy spikes from the human homeworld. They appear to be moving planetary defense installations. Zexthera focused his attention on Earth and felt his certainty crumble further. The humans had somehow made their space elevators mobile, turning them into massive railguns that launched projectiles at significant fractions of light speed. Orbital platforms that should have been stationary were accelerating toward the battle zone, powered by drives that shouldn't be able to move such massive structures. How are they doing this? He demanded. Unknown, Admiral. Their engineering appears to ignore fundamental principles of structural integrity and power generation. By all known physics, their space elevators should collapse under the stress of movement. Their orbital platforms should break apart from the acceleration forces they're generating. A new voice cut into the fleet network, Admiral Chen, somehow broadcasting directly into their shared consciousness, despite having no psychic abilities. Admiral Zexthera, This is your last chance to withdraw. We don't want to destroy your ships, but we will if you force us to." "Impossible," Zexthera transmitted back. "You cannot access our communication network. Your species lacks psychic abilities." "Oh, we figured out how your crystal technology works about 3 hours ago," Chen replied, and Zexthera could somehow sense her grin through the connection. "Turns out your psychic network runs on quantum entanglement patterns that are surprisingly easy to hack once you understand the basic principles. We've been listening to your tactical discussions this whole time." The implications hit Zexthera like a physical blow. If the humans could access the fleet network, they knew everything. Ship positions, weapon capabilities, tactical plans. Worse, they had somehow reverse-engineered Valdorian technology in a matter of hours, something that should have taken decades of study. "Impossible," he repeated, but with less certainty. "Nothing's impossible," Chen answered. "Just improbable. And we're very good with improbable." To prove her point, a human assault ship appeared directly in front of Zexthera's flagship, having somehow jumped through hyperspace without the massive crystal drives that made such travel possible. The ship was tiny compared to his vessel, but it bristled with weapons that shouldn't exist, and moved in ways that violated every law of physics he knew. The assault ship opened fire at point-blank range. Its weapons tore through the flagship's shields and armor, like they were made of paper, sending crystal shards spinning through space. Emergency alarms screamed through the ship's network as atmosphere bled from dozens of hull breaches. But the most terrifying part wasn't the damage. It was what happened next. Human soldiers in armored suits smashed through the holes in his ship's hull, somehow surviving in hard vacuum while carrying weapons that fired crystalline projectiles identical to Valdorian technology. They moved through the ship's corridors like they belonged there, fighting with a combination of advanced tactics and complete disregard for their own safety that left Valdorian defenders paralyzed with confusion. "Admiral," one of his security officers reported, "the human boarders are wearing armor that incorporates our own crystal matrices. They're using our weapons against us, but modified in ways that make them more effective than the originals." Zexthera tried to coordinate a defense, but the humans weren't following any logical attack pattern. They seemed to split up randomly, with some groups heading for the engine rooms, while others targeted life support systems or communication arrays. Some simply wandered the ship, apparently exploring for the sake of curiosity. The strangest part was their reaction to Valdorian psychic abilities. When his security teams tried to use mental attacks, the humans didn't resist or defend themselves. They simply ignored the psychic assaults as if they weren't happening. Their minds remained chaotic, jumping from thought to thought in patterns that made it impossible to establish any kind of mental control. "Admiral Chen," Zexthera broadcast desperately, "call off your boarding parties. We can negotiate terms." "Sorry, Admiral," came the reply. "But they're not really following orders anymore. Once we figured out how your ships work, our people got excited about all the new technology they could study. I think some of them are probably taking apart your engines right now just to see how they're built." As if summoned by her words, the flagship's power systems flickered and died. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows through the crystal corridors, as human voices echoed from the engine room, speaking in excited tones about energy matrix configurations and crystalline resonance patterns. "Admiral." His engineering officer's thoughts were tight with panic. "The humans have somehow improved our engine efficiency by 30%. They've rewired the entire power distribution system using principles I've never seen before." Zexthera floated in his crystal shell, watching his perfect, ordered world crumble around him. The humans weren't just defeating his fleet. They were taking it apart and rebuilding it according to their own insane logic. And somehow, their modifications were making Valdorian technology work better than it ever had before. For the first time in 3 centuries, Admiral Zexthera began to wonder if the Valdorian hegemony might not be as invincible as he had always believed. Outside his ship, the battle continued to rage as human vessels swarmed through his fleet like angry insects, attacking with weapons that shouldn't work and tactics that shouldn't succeed. But they were working, and they were succeeding, and Zexthera had no idea how to stop them. The humans, he was beginning to realize, might actually be more dangerous than anything the galaxy had ever seen. And they were just getting started. Grand Admiral Thexnara arrived with the full might of Battlefleet Prime 6 months later, expecting to find the remnants of a minor rebellion that had gotten lucky against an unprepared scout force. Instead, she found something that challenged everything she believed about the nature of reality itself. The human system had transformed. Where Thexnara had reported a handful of primitive colonies, Thexnara's sensors detected hundreds of installations scattered throughout the star system. Space stations that moved like ships, asteroids that had been turned into mobile fortresses, and everywhere, the energy signatures of Valdorian technology mixed with something else, something that made her crystalline form ache just to observe. "Report," she commanded as Battlefleet Prime dropped out of hyperspace. Grand Admiral, her intelligence officer's thoughts carried deep confusion. The humans appear to have completely reverse-engineered our technology. But their modifications, the energy patterns, are unlike anything in our databases. They've somehow integrated our crystal matrices with their own materials in ways that should be physically impossible. Thexnara studied the tactical displays, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. Human ships moved through space using hybrid drives that combined Valdorian hyperspace technology with their own fusion systems. The result should have been catastrophic failure. Instead, the humans were somehow moving faster than pure Valdorian vessels. "Where is Admiral Thexnara's fleet?" "Unknown, Grand Admiral. We're detecting several Valdorian ship signatures, but they appear to be under human control. Energy readings suggest significant modifications to their original configurations. This complete town." Before Thexnara could process that information, a familiar voice cut through her ship's communication system. "Grand Admiral Thexnara, this is Admiral Chen of the United Earth Space Command. Welcome to the Sol system. I believe you're here about Admiral Thexnara?" The casual tone made Thexnara's crystal shell flicker with anger. "You will release Admiral Thexnara immediately and surrender your system to hegemony control." "Oh, Thexnara's fine," Chen replied cheerfully. "He's actually been very helpful. Once we figured out how to communicate properly, he's been teaching us a lot about Valdorian culture and technology. In return, we've been showing him some of our own innovations. It's been quite educational for everyone involved. Admiral Thexnara would never cooperate with primitive species. I wouldn't call us primitive anymore," Chen said, and something in her mental signature suggested she was genuinely amused. "We've learned a lot in the past 6 months. Would you like a demonstration?" Without waiting for an answer, the space around Battlefleet Prime suddenly filled with human ships. They appeared from nowhere, using some kind of stealth technology that had completely bypassed Valdorian sensors. But that wasn't the most disturbing part. The most disturbing part was that the human ships looked like they had been grown rather than built. Their hulls showed the distinctive crystalline patterns of Valdorian technology, but twisted into organic curves that reminded Thexnara of living creatures. Energy coursed through crystal veins that pulsed with rhythms that almost seemed like heartbeats. These ships weren't just using Valdorian technology. They were somehow alive. "How?" Thexnara demanded. "It turns out your crystal matrices are incredibly adaptive," Chen explained. "When we started experimenting with biological integration, the crystals began responding to our neural patterns. They actually seem to enjoy working with organic systems. Who would have thought crystal beings would get along so well with carbon-based life?" Thexnara tried to process that information. Valdorian crystals were tools, not living beings. They responded to psychic commands. Nothing more. The idea that they could form some kind of partnership with alien biology was impossible. "Thexnara." She broadcast on the fleet's emergency frequency. "Report your status immediately." The response came from an unexpected source. A human ship that looked like it had been grown around a Valdorian crystal core. When Thexnara's voice emerged from the vessel, it carried harmonics that shouldn't exist. "Grand Admiral, I am. Well, the humans have shown me things about our own technology that we never understood. Did you know that our crystal matrices are actually living beings? They've been trying to communicate with us for millennia, but we never learned to listen properly." "That is impossible," Thexnara stated flatly. "I thought so too," Thexnara replied. But the humans taught me how to hear them. Grand Admiral, they're not just tools. They're partners. They've been waiting for us to understand that we could work together instead of simply commanding them. Thexnara felt her certainty beginning to crack. If Zexthera was telling the truth, then everything the Valdorians believed about their own technology was wrong. They had built their empire on a foundation of ignorance. You have been compromised, she decided. We will extract you and eliminate this contamination. I'm afraid that won't be possible, Admiral Chen interjected. You see, your admiral chose to stay. We offered him the chance to leave, but he wanted to continue studying with our research teams. Apparently, we've made some discoveries about crystal biology that he finds fascinating. Battlefleet Prime's weapons systems came online, targeting the human ships that surrounded them. But as Thexnara prepared to give the order to fire, her tactical officers' panicked thoughts flooded the network. Grand Admiral, the humans are jamming our targeting systems. But not with electromagnetic interference. They're using our own crystal networks against us. Somehow, they've learned to speak directly to our weapon systems. To prove the point, the fleet's weapons turned away from the human ships and powered down of their own accord. Warning signals flashed through every vessel as their own technology refused to obey their commands. Sorry about that, Chen said, not sounding sorry at all. But we can't let you start shooting at us. We've got too many joint projects underway to risk damaging the ships. Zexthera's people have been working with our engineers on some really interesting innovations. What projects? Thexnara found herself asking. Oh, all sorts of things. Improved hyperspace drives, better energy weapons, more efficient life support systems. It's amazing what you can accomplish when you combine Valdorian logic with human creativity. We've probably advanced both our technologies by centuries in just 6 months. Thexnara stared at her displays, watching human and Valdorian ships working together in formations that seemed to dance through space. The energy patterns flowing between them were unlike anything she had ever seen. Pure Valdorian efficiency enhanced by something chaotic and unpredictable that made the entire fleet stronger than the sum of its parts. This is impossible, she whispered. Everything's impossible until someone does it, Chen replied. That's the first thing you learn about humans. We specialize in the impossible. The second thing you learn is that we're very good at making friends with people who help us figure out new impossible things to do. Grand Admiral, came a new voice over the communication system, speaking in perfect High Valdorian, but with an accent she had never heard before. This is Dr. Elizabeth Warren of the Human Valdorian Joint Research Initiative. We've been hoping to meet you. Admiral Zexthera has told us so much about Valdorian culture, and we have some questions about your historical archives that we think you might find interesting. The casual mixing of human and Valdorian languages, the easy assumption that she would want to participate in their research, the complete absence of fear or deference, it all combined to create a psychological impact that Thexnara wasn't prepared for. These humans weren't treating the Valdorian hegemony like an enemy to be feared or a master to be obeyed. They were treating the Valdorians like interesting neighbors who might want to collaborate on science projects. You cannot defeat the full might of the hegemony, Thexnara said, but her words sounded hollow even to her own ears. We're not trying to defeat anyone, Chen answered. We're trying to learn. And from what Admiral Zexthara tells us, the Valdorian hegemony could learn a lot from us too. We think there might be room in this galaxy for more than one way of thinking. Around her, Battlefleet Prime hung helpless in space, their own technology turned against them by an enemy that shouldn't exist. But the humans weren't destroying them. They were simply waiting. Waiting to see what she would choose. For the first time in her long life, Grand Admiral Thexnara began to wonder if the Valdorian way might not be the only way after all. The news spread through the galaxy faster than hyperspace communications should have allowed. Within days, every species that had ever bowed to Valdorian rule knew the impossible truth. The hegemony's Battlefleet Prime had not returned from the human system. More disturbing still, the few reports that did emerge suggested that the fleet had not been destroyed, but had instead joined the humans somehow. Supreme Chancellor Keth Zara, the highest-ranking Valdorian in the galaxy, floated in the crystal chambers of the Imperial Palace, trying to understand reports that challenged the fundamental nature of reality itself. For 10,000 years, the Valdorian hegemony had been absolute. Their technology was perfect. Their methods were proven. Their control was complete. Now, that control was dissolving. "Show me the transmission again," she commanded her intelligence council. The holographic display activated, showing the image of a human female standing beside Admiral Zex Thara. But this wasn't the Admiral Zex Thara that had left for the human system months ago. His crystal shell glowed with new energy patterns, and when he spoke, his voice carried harmonics that suggested joy, an emotion Valdorians weren't supposed to experience. "Supreme Chancellor," Zex Thara's recorded voice said, "I am transmitting from Earth to inform you of developments that will change everything we thought we knew about our own existence. The humans have taught us that our crystal matrices are not simply tools, but living partners that have been trying to communicate with us for millennia." Keth Zara felt her ancient certainties crumble as she watched her admiral gesture to complex diagrams that showed Valdorian technology integrated with biological systems in ways that should have been impossible. "More importantly," Zex Thara continued, "they have shown us that cooperation produces better results than domination. The technological advances we have achieved in 6 months of partnership exceed anything the hegemony has accomplished in the past 1,000 years." The transmission switched to show massive construction projects in the human system, ships that looked like living creatures, space stations that seemed to grow rather than being built, and energy patterns that danced through space like aurora given form. Human and Valdorian crews worked together on projects that defied every principle of known science. The humans wished to extend an invitation to any Valdorian who is interested in collaborative research, Zex Thara concluded. They believe that our combined knowledge could benefit all species in the galaxy. They are particularly interested in working with our subject species, as they feel that diversity of thought produces the best solutions to complex problems. The transmission ended, leaving Keth Zara staring at the empty holographic space where her worldview had just been shattered. Collaborative research, partnership with subject species, diversity of thought. These concepts had no place in Valdorian philosophy. "Supreme Chancellor," her military advisor's thoughts whispered through the crystal network, "we are receiving reports from across the galaxy. Subject species are requesting information about the humans. Some are asking for permission to establish contact. Others are questioning their tribute obligations." That last part sent crystalline spikes of alarm through Keth Zara's consciousness. If the subject species began to doubt Valdorian authority, the entire hegemony could collapse within years instead of millennia. "What is our fleet response status?" she demanded. "Unknown, Supreme Chancellor. Battlefleet Prime has not reported in for 3 weeks. Battlefleet 7 has gone silent since entering the human system. We are detecting energy signatures consistent with our vessels, but they are not responding to our commands." Before Keth Zara could respond, the palace's communication systems activated without authorization. The image that appeared showed Admiral Chen standing in what looked like a vast garden, with crystalline trees growing alongside Earth vegetation in patterns that hurt to look at but somehow seemed natural. "Supreme Chancellor Keth Zara," Chen said with a smile, "I hope you don't mind the direct communication, but we've been hoping to speak with you. Admiral Zex Thara has told us so much about Valdorian history, and we think there are some things you might want to know. You cannot access our secure communication networks," Keth Zara stated, though she was beginning to suspect that the humans could do many things that should have been impossible. "Oh, we're not accessing them," Chen replied cheerfully. "We're talking through them. Your crystal networks are remarkably cooperative once you learn to ask nicely, instead of just giving orders. They've been trying to tell you things for thousands of years." Behind Chen, Keth Zara could see Valdorian and human researchers working together on devices that incorporated both crystal technology and organic components. The energy readings from their experiments registered as impossible on every scale she knew. "What do you want?" Keth Zara asked, though she was afraid she already knew the answer. "We want to learn," Chen said simply. "Your species has 10,000 years of accumulated knowledge. Your subjects have had millennia to develop their own unique approaches to science and philosophy. And we humans, well, we're good at finding new ways to combine old ideas. Chen gestured to a display that showed star maps with energy flows connecting systems across the galaxy. We think the galaxy would be a much more interesting place if everyone was free to contribute their best ideas, instead of just following orders from the strongest empire. The hegemony maintains order, Keth Zara protested. Without central control, there would be chaos. Would there? Chen asked, and her mental signature carried genuine curiosity. Or would there be creativity? We've found that chaos and creativity are often the same thing, viewed from different angles. As if summoned by her words, the communication expanded to show images from across the galaxy. Valdorian ships arriving at subject worlds, but instead of collecting tribute, they were delivering supplies and offering to share technology. Species that had been silent for centuries were suddenly broadcasting new discoveries and artistic expressions. Trade routes that had been rigid for millennia were adapting to carry ideas as well as goods. Your fleets aren't destroyed, Supreme Chancellor, Chen explained. They're learning. Just like Admiral Zexthara, they've discovered that partnership produces better results than dominance. And your subject species are learning too. Did you know that the Keltharian mathematics could revolutionize your hyperspace technology? Or that Zephyrian poetry actually contains encoded scientific principles that could improve your crystal growing techniques? Keth Zara watched her empire transform in real time as the communication continued. Systems that had been locked in place for thousands of years were suddenly changing, adapting, growing. It was chaos, yes, but it was also something else. It was alive. The galaxy is changing, Supreme Chancellor, Chen said gently. The question is whether the Valdorian hegemony will change with it, or whether it will try to hold on to old ways that no longer serve anyone well. The communication ended, leaving Keth Zara alone with her thoughts in the crystal chamber that had once been the center of galactic power. Around her, the palace's systems hummed with the same energy patterns she had seen in the human transmissions. Her own technology was learning to sing. Reports continued to flood in from across the galaxy. Fleet commanders requesting permission to collaborate with human research teams. Subject species offering to share technologies they had developed in secret during millennia of oppression. Scientists proposing joint projects that would have been unthinkable under the old order. The Valdorian hegemony, built on absolute control and enforced silence, was dissolving. But something new was taking its place. Something that hummed with possibility and danced with the chaotic energy of a billion minds, working together instead of in isolation. Keth Zara floated in her crystal shell, listening to the songs her technology was learning to sing, and realized that for the first time in 10,000 years, the galaxy was truly alive. The humans had not conquered the Valdorian hegemony. They had done something far more terrifying and wonderful. They had taught it how to dream. And in the vast darkness between the stars, 10,000 years of silence finally ended, as the galaxy began to speak in voices it had never known it possessed. The age of the hegemony was over. The age of infinite possibility had begun. All because a small blue world had refused to surrender, and had instead offered something the galaxy had forgotten existed: hope.